Welcome back to The Narrative. I'm your storyteller, Callistra Faria. Well, the Jamaicans, for the 38th time, dominating the CARIFTA Games, topping the medals table. The games were hosted by Grenada from March 30 to April 1st. Joining me on the program now to take a look at the games, the athletes, and the show that Grenada put on for the event is Michael Bascombe, a sports reporter, sports journalist. Welcome to the program, Michael.
Thank you, Callistra, and it's my pleasure.
And good to have you on. So, CARIFTA Games, did Grenada put on a show worthy of the event?
We can say yes, we can say no. It depends on where you sit looking at it. Certainly, in terms of performances, I would say yes, given the fact that the quality of athletes that Grenada have at present. So yes, if you are comparing them to the Jamaicans, the Bahamians, the Trinidadians, some people may say we're not at that level yet. You see, the Jamaicans are continuing to dominate, given the fact that they do have quite a bit of our athletes, well, athletes particularly from the Eastern Caribbean now training in Jamaica, and you would have seen that some of these athletes, winning medals. So to an extent, the Jamaica formula is working in some of the islands, including Grenada, right? But I would say overall, the 2024 CARIFTA Games hosted in Grenada was a success, and our athletes live up to the expectation of their performance.
Now, before we get into the Jamaicans and how they did and why Jamaica continues to do so well in athletics in the region, let's talk about Grenada. We won, more than half a dozen medals, you were telling me? A team of just under 60 athletes, one gold. Who were the outstanding performers for Grenada? What does the future look like based on what happened at CARIFTA?
Yeah. There are a couple of, and even those who did not win medals, I still consider them to be outstanding because they have some athletes who performed creditably and some who, as again, didn't make the medal, the podium, but they did their best. They had personal best times. We see, for example, and I can tell you a story about D'Angelo Brown, who came into the team. There was a bit of, concerns about him being on the team, coming from New York, coming from indoor running, basically, and only 16 years though. And look, he was able to get a silver in the 800 meters. It's all about the opportunities, right? And it's all about giving these athletes that opportunity when there is an opportunity available. And then there are other athletes who came out of actually Intercall, for example, and did pretty well. And there was some level of expectation of them. Some of them live up to that billing, some didn't, because obviously that level of competition is much more than Intercall. But there are a cadre of athletes, I would say, apart from Brown, and there's another Brown, Melissa Brown from the Boca Secondary School, for example. Then the athletes from the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School, they were one gold medalists, in the triple jump, for example. And then we also have the athletes who double in the javelin event, for example, winning a silver and a bronze, knowing that Grenada has been a dominant force in the throws at the CARIFTA Games for many years. It appears now that Grenada is getting back into that fold, okay, because we had a drought for a period of time after the Anderson, Peters era, So overall, I think there are a number of athletes. I don't want to just, I made the case of D'Angelo because there was this concern about him being on the team, and then he was able to basically silence his critics. But there were a number of athletes who won medals, didn't win medals, but did their best, performing extraordinary, having personal best times and throws and things like that.
You have watched a lot of athletes over these last three decades, 3.5 decades or so, Michael. Any Kirani Jameses, Anderson Peters, Lyndon Victors that you are looking out for on the world stage in
Yeah,
the next few years?
yeah, yeah,
Any that
yeah, yeah.
stand
They
out in
are.
those areas? Yeah.
Yes, and the four. Well, I mean, if you look at the 400
Yeah, the
meters, for
for the
example,
cross
and even
tie. Uh-huh.
yeah, and the four, well, yes, and the 4x4 relays, right?
Mm,
I think it's a good question, and I think it's something that we can look forward to in the future. Calistra, the problem is giving these athletes that opportunity. Do we keep them together? Do we gel them? Have them give them the opportunity to continue competing even together? So yes, the 400 meters, yes, a 4x4 relay team. I think that is in the billing. We have seen some athletes giving us some, some 46 and 47, and they're very young. In a year or two, we may be able to see them into the 45 regions, right?
mhm.
And things like that. So yes, in terms of the 400 meters. In the javelin, particularly, we are seeing athletes who are getting back into the 50s and the 60s in the throws, right? We even seen some female athletes as well in the throws, the shot put and the discus. And there's also the multi events, the decathlon, the Lyndon Victor and the Kurt Felix. And one good thing about that, Calistra, is that Kurt Felix was a member of the coaching staff, especially for the high jumps, because, the multi events is jumps and throws and, all of that. And I thought that was a good initiative to have someone like a Kurt Felix on the team. And we are seeing our athletes are getting back into that. The problem, though, is keeping them together, gelling them, and hoping that they can continue staying focused and continue to excel.
Which brings me to a country like Jamaica, for instance, where they take this seriously. I mean, they identify the athletes early and they nurture them. There are opportunities. In Grenada, you do well, and it's on a wing and a prayer that you might end up training and getting the right equipment and the right facilities. Before you know it, you're 18, you're 19, and you have to go look for a job, and you really don't have time to train because no one's bothering with you. You're a runner or you throw the javelin. It's not a big deal. But Jamaica really puts that focus. And you earlier in the program, you talked about OECS athletes doing well in Jamaica. So they are scouting our people. They're going to Jamaica. They're winning medals under the banner of the Jamaica flag. While we here in the Eastern Caribbean, and particularly Grenada, we continue to not pay attention. What do we take away from the Jamaica model that may allow us one day to maybe not dominate CARIFTA, but to at least win a bit more medals?
Calistra is a simple one. Good question, but simple. The investment. The Jamaicans are serious about it. We talk a lot, eh? But when it comes to Jamaica, and not just track and field, but sports in general, is the level of the investment that they put into their sports, and in particular track and field. Obviously, the Usain Bolt era, Shelley and Fraser Price, and all of these would have, spurred the Jamaicans on and things like that. Really inspired these athletes. But I think most importantly is the sort of investment the Jamaicans make. They say, and probably it's true, if there's an athletic meet on the moon, the Jamaicans will go there and compete. They already, I listened to a couple of the interviews with the coach, even the president of the Jamaica Athletics Association, Mr. Garth Gale. And they were speaking already about some of the international competitions that some of the athletes already qualified or they will be participating in. They were speaking about the pen relays, for example. Okay?
Mhm.
As far as our athletes are concerned, and in Grenada, probably the next meet will be probably the Whitsuntide Games, right? And then the season's closed. But the Jamaicans have meets. Some of the athletes are returning to Jamaica. Some of them are returning to the US, and they go in and compete. They are competing until probably the end of the season, I would say.
Mhm.
On the airport yesterday, there were at least two Grenadians who were returning to Jamaica. They are returning. You would think it's time for take a little break, and things like that. So they're returning to Jamaica to continue, albeit they're schooling in Jamaica. So is this the seriousness that the Jamaicans take with track and field and sports in general? Because when you look at football and cricket, it's the sort of investment they make into that. And added to that, Calistra, is the support they have, that support system. You would have seen apart from, the Bahamian, which is something separate in terms of the support, the number of Jamaicans who accompany their team to the CARIFTA Games, albeit the other way around. Let's say it's hosted in Jamaica or in the Bahamas, for example. I don't think we'll see that many Grenadians out there supporting the Grenadian team. And that's the sort of difference we see. And I think it adds a lot to the success of the Jamaicans. They support not just financially in terms of the government and sponsors, but also the spectators. They have a ban army. They travel with them. They encourage their athletes. They inspire their athletes. And we talk a lot in the Eastern Caribbean in particular. We just talk about sports. We talk about track and field. We get hype up about intercall. But after that, everything done. In fact, probably by the end of the day, we move away from the intercall and we start talking. Well, we get back into our politics and our
Politics
local,
and politics and
yeah,
carnival.
right, on carnival, yeah.
Because I remember attending a consultation with Patrick Simmons, a former Minister of Sports. I think he's now an advisor. And they were talking about the National Sports Council. That has been a talk for a long time. It was there under the previous NDC administration. It's back again, but we're almost 2 years in, and I have not seen or heard anything concrete about that. Now, one of the things that was discussed at that, and I said to them, why are we not finding some piece of land somewhere and building an institution so that our athletes and the people with potential can attend a school there where they can focus on the training and becoming athletes, instead of having to fight up with everybody else. And I'm thinking, why is it taking us so long? We don't have as many athletes as Jamaica does. Our population is nowhere near Jamaica's population. Why is it so hard for us to put some money into athletics? We were so proud of Pirani when he won those medals. We're so proud of Lyndon Victor, and we're so proud of Anderson Peters. But those are just momentary flashes in the pan kind of successes without us putting ourselves out there behind it. What do you think it would take? It didn't take Kirani James. It didn't take Lyndon Victor. It did not take the world javelin champion Anderson Peters. What would it take for Grenada to realize that we need to stop shunning our athletes and look at athletics and sports in general as an honorable representation of the nation and as an honorable career as well for young people? What would it take?
Well, it takes a lot, eh? And just going back to the sports council you're referring to, in fact, I believe there ongoing consultations now in
I
terms
think it's
of
a
the parish.
national sports policy, yeah, which includes
Well,
the sports
yes, so the
council.
national sports policy, an aspect of the sports policy is the National Sports Council,
Mhm.
and then they are doing consultations now at the parish levels. I think they may have just stopped because of the CARIFTA Games, and then they will continue. So they're moving from parish to parish and setting up these parish sports councils that will feed into the National Sports Council that is part of the National Sports Policy itself. But getting into the meat of the matter, Calistra, is you can have a lot of policies and these sort of things, but it's having the willpower, and there has to be sometimes you say politics don't fit into those things, but there must be the politics in that. Okay, you must have the political will as well, because sometimes you have to get the politicians on board to create the laws and certain things and drive some of the policies and things like that. So, but as well as the commitment of the people themselves. Okay, we need committed people and the involvement of people. I have heard, Calistra, that people are complaining that when Grenada hosted the CARIFTA Games in 2000, then they hosted in 2016, the same set of people from 2000, 2016 are around in 2024.
Oh,
We need
wow.
some new, yeah, we need some new minds. We need some new thinking. And I think that in itself will assist in us driving some of the issues regarding the policies, the structure, all these sort of things. And we'll probably get more people involved and have some new direction in terms of sports. Some people believe that the thinking is stagnated because the same people around since 2000, 2016, or 2024, that's 24 years ago, when you look at it, that the mindset may not have changed. And unless you get new people with new thinking and new concepts and thing on board, then we may not be able to move that far. Albeit, as some of the islands, whether it's Jamaica or Bahamas, from time to time you see new folks get in and get involved. There's a transition, all these sort of things. It appears in Grenada that's just one set of people, and they're not interested in bringing new ideas and new folks into the fold. And probably that's one of the areas that we, the whole issue of administrators and administration, that we're not really getting what we deserve, and to an extent our sportsmen and sportswomen, and in this case our athletes, are suffering. In terms of a legacy for Grenada, obviously Kirani is a brand name. Kirani is known internationally, and certainly there isn't anything apart from probably the Kirani James Boulevard and the Kirani James Athletic Stadium that is, something symbolic or in terms of a legacy for Grenada. But how many Grenadian athletes are destined to be a Kirani James, a Anderson Peters, a Lyndon Victor, etc., etc., even a Hazelland Regis Buckles, So you're on point in terms of that, but I believe unless we get people, one, who are committed, and two, who are prepared to to provide an opportunity for a transition in terms of new ideas, new concepts, etc., I don't think we'll get that far, CARIFTA.
So we need transformation.
Yes, it is a very common word now in Grenada, and I think it's probably one that is needed in sports, certainly.
I mean, if you have the same people doing the same thing for 24 years and it's obviously not working, then somebody needs to grab that bull by the horn and ride it to where it actually needs to go.
Yeah,
It's just common sense.
certainly, and yeah, and there's nothing against those people. It's just that the transition, we need those folks. We need them around, because certainly the experience, etc., will be able to pass on. But we need folks who can be part of the club, who can bring new ideas, bring new concept, debate it, and see how we can move sports to another level than just believe that, okay, we host the games and that is enough, and then our athletes were able to participate, that is enough. But where do we go from here? As I said, we are speaking to the Jamaicans and the Bahamians on Sunday and Monday, and they're already speaking about some of the plans that they have for their athletes. Even the athletes themselves, they were speaking about what next for them. We can ask the average Grenadian athlete that, and they will tell you, I don't know. I'll probably with St. Tide games, and that's it. So unless we get people who are serious about the development of sports, seeing the future, seeing the interest and the development of the athletes as priorities, and not just their self-gratification, CARIFTA, we wouldn't be making that far.
So, Michael, when we look at also the Bahamians and the Trinidad and Tobago athletes, how did they stack up in the games?
Yes, the rivalry, obviously will always be between among, I should say, the Jamaicans, the Bahamians, Trinidad and Tobago, and to a lesser extent, Barbados, even though Barbados have not been in the fore of recent. And we've seen teams like Grenada, even Antigua, and even Guyana, coming into the fore these days. But Jamaica, the Bahamas, and Trinidad and Tobago will always be the top three teams in the CARIFTA games. And albeit, again, CARIFTA, it has to do with the sort of investment that these countries make towards their sports one, and in particularly track and field. Even though, as we'll say, that in the case of Grenada, in terms of the school base, it's probably the second best to Jamaica in the region. Trinidad more have a club structure, more clubs participate, even though the athletes from the schools are in the clubs, but they more club structure. But they take the track and field very serious. And again, it has to do a lot with the sort of investment, the sort of structure they have in place, the opportunities available for the athletes in those regions. Bahamas, for example, just as Jamaica, a lot of the athletes from the Bahamas fly into Florida or parts of the US, and compete. you know, there are a number of them who go, teams that go to the Penn relays, the Texas relays, all these events there to participate. So they have a lot of competitions. Trinidad, they also participate in the Penn relays, but they also have a lot of local competitions rather for their athletes. The problem we have in Grenada is not enough competitive action for athletes at the level, not just the mini meet we're speaking about, but regular meets where they can compete, they can gauge, they can improve, coaches can see them and things like that. So, and in addition to that, Calistro, again, the support, not just of the government or sponsors, but from the public, that sort of support. Look at the Trinidad posse that came up to support Trinidad and Tobago. Look at the section with their flags and things. Don't talk about the Bahamas. They have the Banami as well, the Junkanoo. They have been traveling with the Bahamas team for years. It's a staple in the CARIFTA games. Wherever they go, they have 2 charter flights. One flight for the athletes and the officials, and the other flight is for the support. Whether it's the band, the parents, members of the public who want to book a seat. 2 charter flights. Bermuda came with a charter flight to Grenada. Trinidad had their charter flights. They take this thing serious. And that's why these countries are always at another level, because there's a lot of investment from the public, from the government, from the sponsors, okay, to track and field, and particularly the CARIFTA games. Trinidad is already in a readiness mode for 2025. I'll be there hosting the CARIFTA games, the CARIFTA Aquatic, that's the swimming championships, and a cycling championship on the same weekend. That's the Easter weekend of 2025. So a lot of things happening, and I'm certainly...
That's a lot happening. But as you speak of
Yeah.
charter flights, I remember our team, our athletics team, they were scheduled to go somewhere a few months ago. I was interviewing Conrad Francis, and they needed to charter a plane and couldn't find the funds. They were struggling to get a plane to take them where they needed to go. And I was surprised. I was shocked. I thought, you know what? Even if private sector doesn't write a check, that the government would just cut a check to send our flag wherever our flag needs to fly. So that was very shocking for me, surprising for me. But then again, I always remember the story of the early days of Kirani James, where someone said to me that he went to the Ministry of Sports with his coach at the time to ask for assistance for his athletics. And he sat on a bench outside of the ministry, outside the door of the ministry, and no one would pay attention to him. They practically ignored him. I always remember that story. Whenever we hail Kirani as the hero, I remember that when he needed the push, if it was not just for sheer grit of that young man, maybe we wouldn't have that medal, that Olympics medal now, that Olympic medal. Yeah.
Is giving the athletes the opportunity. That is what is significant, Kalistra. And sometimes, again, it has to do with the planning, because we had the instance for Antigua, for example, had a similar situation, as you say, with Grenada, in terms of they coming to participate in the games. And there was a back and forth between the government and the Athletics Association regarding the Antigua's participation in the games. And it has to do with the number of, budgeting. So the Antigua Athletics Association provided a budget to the government, and then they revised the budget, and then they revised it again, and there were probably 3 revisions, So as the minister was saying, well, before we can really cut a check, we really want to know what it is, Let us know exactly, because we don't want to give you $10,000 and then it's 15 or 20 that you really need. So let us know if you need 10, 15 or 20, So sometimes it has to do with the planning. And I think particularly for countries as Grenada and others, the small economies, the planning stage is very important. If you have a budget, for example, and you have to cut, sports probably will be the first on the chopping block. Health and education and all these, will survive. Sports will have to get a cut. So sometimes it's important for these associations, these organizations, to plan in advance. Let us know where, let the authorities know, especially if you're seeking assistance, what are your plans for the year? Where do you hope to go? It may be something that just came up all of a sudden, but most of these, athletics championships are, planned way in advance. And sometimes we just need to organize a bit better and plan ahead so that there can't be any problems in the
No,
future.
no, no, you talked about not having a sufficient local action for athletes. We have the sports, individual school sports. We have intercall. We used to have something called the national games. I don't know if we still do. Then there's Whitsuntide, but not a lot. What would you advise for Grenada? We've got this huge athletic stadium there that we're barely ever using. In terms of more action year round to get the athletes from the various districts to compete?
Yeah, well,
Should we just organize more
apart from,
national meets?
well, not, and just not just national. And by the way, and that is one of the things I'm really hoping with the sports policy and the National Sports Council and the parish sports councils, because there's no reason why, for example, years ago we had the Eastern Games, for example, that will take place in St. Andrew, and will bring the athletes from the parishes, even St. Patrick's will send athletes, but mainly St. Andrew and St. David's. Then we had the Western that used to be in Gulf,
Correct.
so we need more of these championships, these athletics competitions that will bring our athletes. And by the way, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the stadium, giving them that opportunity to compete, right? Yes, the stadium is important. The stadium is significant to have them there, to acclimatize themselves and things. But having them competing, that is important. Again, when you talk about that, they will tell you about the sponsors and the money, etc., etc. But I was speaking to the president of the Secondary Schools Games Association, and she was referring to that, to the hope that probably the Eastern Games is something that will come back. Look what you see in the excitement in the parish of St. Andrews, for example, back in the flow of sports, not just intercall in terms of SAS, but even cricket, winning the championships, both junior and senior, having football teams involved in the intercall football, winning as well, and things like that. So we need to have more of these sporting activities, and as we speak about track and field, at the parish level as well. And some of these can be the Eastern Games, the Western Games that we used to have, by the way. And then the Athletic Association get involved to have some additional meets. Obviously, they have what they call the mini meets and things like that. So, and have it, as they do have in Lassages, for example, they go to parts of St. Patrick's, etc. But they need to have some more competitions for athletes, because as you see it now, intercall, CARIFTA games, we might have the national relay meet, which is just basically relays, and then Whitsuntide, and that's basically the end of the season for our athletes in Grenada. Albeit when they're outside of Grenada, they are competing almost every weekend.
Do we have any athletes who are going on to the international circuit? I know that you're saying, the Bahamians, the Trinidadians, the Jamaicans, they already have their schedule for the season. But do we have any athletes that are moving on to the international circuit?
Well, the focus for some of our athletes, especially those outside of Grenada, will be the NCAA. We now into the outdoor season. So we'll see some of our athletes like the Gamali Felix and others have started to compete in the outdoor championship, but that's at the college level. Our elite athletes like the Kirani James and the Lyndon Victor and Anderson Peters, they are getting ready for the Diamond League, for example. And then they focus obviously on Paris 2024, which is the Olympics. Remember, this is an Olympic year. So most of our athletes, our elite athletes, are getting towards that. Some who have not qualified, looking to qualify, and but specifically at the college level, and that's where most of our athletes are. By the way, looking forward to the outdoor season. We have some of them at the junior college level and some of them at the senior college level, NCAA. We had, Gamali Felix, as I mentioned. We have Kelsey Ross, who is at Georgia and did a personal best. In fact, she had a record-breaking throw on the weekend. Albeit the CARIFTA games would have marred her performance because she's at college and things like that.
No
But
one heard about it. No one was in the forest when
that's
it
what
was
I'm
being
saying. So,
held. Okay.
but that's the focus of mainly of our athletes in terms of their performances upcoming, I should say, at the well, that probably at the international stage, because most of them will be at the college level participating in NCAA, and then we have the elite athletes like the Kirani, the Anderson, and Lyndon Victor.
And Victor is going to be at Paris 24.
Yes, he has already qualified for Paris 24. Anderson, definitely in the runnings, I should say. From what I've understood is that he's back in terms of his health, and ready for that. And then hopefully, look out for the guy Gamali Fix. He's doing good. He probably can qualify to add another quarter miler to Kirani James at Paris 2024.
Okay, Lyndon Victor, I cheer on all of our athletes, but with him, it's just, I interviewed him and he is such a good soul. And I was so moved with him talking about how he used bamboo in the early days to pole vault. That was really
Yeah,
interesting. And then he was talking about the cost of the poles, that it's so expensive, and he was struggling with that. And I just want to take this opportunity here to say kudos to Huggins, George F. Huggins. They sponsor him, yes? They're his sponsor?
there's a sponsor. Yeah,
Yes, kudos, and
yeah,
Anya Moniz at Huggins, that they have done this,
yeah,
so that a corporate company has come in and fully backed them, and got all the polls that he needed, and so on. That kind of commitment, I think, is what you were talking about earlier, Michael, as well. That
yeah. In addition to that,
we need the cheerleaders, we need the money from corporate,
yeah.
and we need the policies and the legislation from the government to make it all work.
In in addition to that, I must say that Nicholas Brafitt, the son of the late Prime Minister Nicholas Brafitt, and his name
Sir
is actually
Nicholas,
Earl Brafitt, but
yes,
yeah, but he also used Nicholas Brafitt. He has also he came forward to give some assistance to Lyndon Victor after hearing his story. So at least that interview we did with him helped in a way, because like Anderson, he provided Anderson Peters with his first javelin, well, personal javelin, I would say, and he also came forward to assist Lyndon to some extent.
he came forward after you heard my show.
That's what I've just said, Kalistra.
Okay, good, good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, the narrative
yeah,
is glad to help, yes. Well,
yeah.
Michael, I look forward to seeing more great performances from our athletes, and, hopefully you and I can see a time when they get the support that they need, that we can, do better. The potential is there. I want to thank you so much for joining me on The Narrative, and thank you so much for continuing to be a champion of sports and of the athletes, and continuing to provide coverage of the sporting world. I don't do nearly enough of that. I leave that up to sports journalists such as yourself.
Yeah, even though I'm not the mainstream sports journalist, but I still think I can make a contribution, and I want our people, the public, to continue supporting our athletes, our sportsmen and sportswomen in particular, and probably the fever from 2024 can spill over to 2025 in Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, we look forward to that. Thank you so much for being on, Michael. Thanks.
Welcome.
This is The Narrative. I'm your storyteller, Callistra Harris, speaking there to Michael Bascombe, who is a sports journalist and has been covering sports for more than 3 decades, actually. And we were speaking there about the CARIFTA Games, and who did well, and particular focus on Grenada and the need for sports development that will give our athletes a fighting chance on the international scene. More when we come back.